Hello everyone and welcome to the Talking Stick Show. My name is Dale and I am joined this morning by Lindsay Banks. Hello Lindsay.
Hi Dale, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good. So can you tell the listeners a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, so at the minute I call myself a psychic medium and intuitive, but I find it really difficult, to put a label on what it is that I actually do, as I'm constantly evolving and changing and finding new ways of working. So I was called myself a spiritual entrepreneur to begin with because I love creating stuff. So I've written a book, I've got my YouTube channel, and I do interviews as well, like you're doing. So it's a bit strange for me being on this side.
I was like that when Amanda Joy got me on her show. I was like, it was so strange. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to speak more of what I'm doing at the moment. So it's nice to exercise those muscles in the spiritual sense.
Yeah, definitely. So I do a lot of stuff. I tune into people's past lives. I do ancestral healing. I don't know, what else do I do? I've just started speaking light language and using that to help people activate sort of like the DNA and these codes within them. So yeah, a lot of stuff.
And I had a session with you not so long ago, a few days back, and it was outstanding. Before I was getting an insight of a past life in Germany, then Lindsay was talking about the lifetime more and what it meant and stuff like that. And it really connected to what's happening with my throat. And then you went to another past life where I died with something wrong in my throat. So, and I was having a cough that day and it all kind of intertwined into everything. So
yeah, so strange. I'm getting goosebumps just like listening to you saying that again.
It was bizarre because during the day I had a meditation and I saw myself and I did look. I know you can't categorize how Jewish people look, but I got this sense of a Jewish energy when I saw it. And the lifetime on that evening you went back into is where I was Jewish and I was going to the concentration camp and I was old and I had my walking stick.
Yeah. I love that. And then you said that you have an affinity with walking sticks. I was just
I love them, and I love all the craft on the top and the ones where you create different symbols and dragons and animal totems on the actual stick. Then it was funny because you went back into the other lifetime where I was a carpenter, and that was again confirmation and connection with what was really going on in that situation.
Yeah. I find it fascinating being able because I think sometimes, in this lifetime, we're very much concerned about what's going on like in the now. And if we're worrying about something or if we're sick, we'll start thinking, oh, it must be this, it must be that. But actually, it might be stuff, from thousands of years ago that you've never dealt with, and it's coming up now to be healed and to be worked through. So I think it's interesting to have that sort of perspective that, is it because of something that's happening and that's going on now, or is it's because of something that's happened before that I need to work through or I need to deal with?
That's it. And there's people with phobias of drowning and all sorts of things. I've had a few clients who've been scared of going near fire, and they went into their past on a healing session. Sometimes they do go, certainly rarely they'll go into their own past life. And she went into where she got burnt. She could see herself getting burnt, and all of a sudden her elements of fire was so low that she wasn't connecting with the fire in this lifetime. And it's beautiful to see that so many people hold these past life connections. Can you explain a bit more about the past life healing and what it does then, Lindsay?
Yeah, so it's funny because, again, I didn't realise that I could do this, if you like, and tap into them until I was sort of given a healing session. And I started seeing people's past lives for them. And it's interesting because what seemed to be coming up for the majority, especially of women, was around the throat chakra. So I know you mentioned that you had issues with your throat chakra.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is to do with the sort of like oppression in past lives and, being sort of burnt at the stake for being a witch and being persecuted for beliefs that weren't internationally or nationally recognized, and like you said, fears as well. I had one lady who was petrified of horses, and I could see into her past life, and she was on a horse and she was in battle and she'd been killed whilst on a horse and then fallen off it. Okay. So like you said, the fears and some of the phobias that we have in this lifetime are connected with ourselves in past lifetimes as well. So, and it's interesting as well, because when I did a past life reading for a lady the other day, initially we went back to the 1940s, and then I'd asked upstairs, that's what I call them, to show me the previous lifetime. And the previous one was in I think it was around 1880. And I was told that in between that, she was here on Earth, but not in the physical form. So I'd done an interview with a chap called Stephen Towell, who talked about life between lives. And that's completely another subject. But, that's where she was here on Earth, but she just wasn't in the physical. So I think that has an effect as well on us in the now.
Beautiful, beautiful. And there was my mum had a past life regression a while back, probably about 8 years ago, and she got regressed to a point where she starved to death. And this lifetime she was holding on to eating loads of food and buying loads of food in the cupboards, because part of that DNA and past life was scared that the food would run out.
Yeah. And there's so much that comes through. There's like scarcity, there's lack, there's fear, which can present itself in this lifetime. And it's, you're thinking, well, where's this coming from? And I had my first past life regression done, that was ages ago now. It was probably back in 2009. And it was under hypnosis. And I remember I was lying on the couch and she said, right, what's on your feet? And my mind was saying, I'm not wearing any socks. She knows that I've just got no shoes on. But then something clicked and I was like, oh, she means what's on my feet in my past life? And straight away, I could see myself wearing these black boots. And as I worked my way up, I had these red, what looked like jodhpurs on, in a red uniform. And then I had this massive, like black wiry hair. And I knew I was in France. And the word Dordogne came in my head, right? Now, my geography and history, anything about facts, I'm not great with. And in that past life, I was serving the king and queen, and I was doing my duty, if you like, but I had a wife and a young child in a cottage. And whilst I was away serving the king and queen, my family were killed by the enemy. And when she was saying, what lesson are you meant to learn in this lifetime? And I said, I need to spend more time with my family rather than my work. And at the time I was working like 45 to 60 hour weeks, down in retail. So that was a big lesson for me. And learning. And when I said I was in the Dordogne, I said, I don't even know where that is. She went, it's in France. And I was like, oh my God, it's a real place. I think sometimes for people as well, when you're doing that past life readings, it triggers this remembrance for them as well. So they begin to remember who they've been before as well.
Beautiful. And I've had past life regression before, and I remember the first one I had was an old man with long white hair and a long beard, and I got thrown off a bridge. And this reminded me of when I was younger. There's a video of me in Bolton Castle in Yorkshire Dales, and I'm basically in a castle, and all my family go upstairs, and I'm so scared to go up the stairs. I'm screaming, don't take me up those stairs. Don't take me up the stairs. And I was thinking when I was younger, why was I so scared of heights? I was terrified of heights. I've released a lot of that now, and I've done a lot of work on it. Still a bit niffy on the heights, but better than I was, and I can go to high places now. But and so that triggered for me a lot of fear and that past life. So let's talk a little bit about how important it is to have the memory and go back into the memory and resolve it in this lifetime. Why is it important for people to go back in this present lifetime?
So my feeling is it's part of remembering who you are as a soul. So I always talk about how we're energy beings and we've got our aura, and it's part of who you are and who makes you up to be this person in the now. And I feel as if sometimes people say to me, the biggest thing I get told is I feel stuck. So they're feeling stuck and they can't move forward. And often this may be related to a past life. So I said last year, I was like, right, I'm never running women's circles. I don't want to run women's circles. And I've always had, I don't know, there's always been things to do with close groups of women that have come up for me. And then someone in my Facebook group said to me, she said, oh, could you run a women's circle? And I was like, yeah. And inside I was like, oh, no, I really don't want to do that. Why don't I want to do that? So I did a meditation and I was taken away into a forest by this woman wearing a hood, and we were sat there, and there was a very sacred ritual going on, which I was part of, and then I was basically, there was like people came in and sort of took us away, and I was persecuted for it. So I recognized that the reason that I didn't want to run women's circles wasn't because of me now, it was because of stuff that's happened in a past life which stopped me from potentially moving forward and doing something different, outside of my comfort zone. So I think if people are feeling stuck in any way and are afraid to move forward or afraid of expressing themselves in a certain way, then doing the past life healing can really help with that.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it reminded me of a session I actually had from a lady from Spain, and she went into a lifetime where she was not in this world, it was in Orion. So it was before she came to the earth, and she didn't want to come here. And so she's always had this energy of being soul sick and soul like grieving something, and that's her home world. And she didn't want to come here. She got forced to come here. And so there was a lot of that resolve, and she was like, I'm in Orion. And I was like, what? It's just like looking around and like, I'm back home.
Was that the first time you'd had experience of that then?
So yeah, that's the first time I've had past life experiences like that, of physically someone taken back to taken back to her home world. But we had lots of sessions, and we were going through it and trying to figure out. Then all of a sudden this came through, and it was like, it's perfect, because she was really feeling this resentment to living and being a human being. She was not feeling here. She was feeling out of place and like she was homesick. And I thought it was just a connection to the land, and that she wasn't feeling the energy of the land. But then it went back to a past life before the world. And, past world. A new regression, past world regression.
Yeah, I love that.
So when you got into this, Lindsay, so what got you into wanting to do it then? So how did it affect you in your life?
So it's not something that I really set out to want to do, really. It more just happened. So I started off years ago. So basically, yeah. So I went to uni. I did everything that you're meant to do. I went to uni, graduated, and I got a job working for a major retailer. And I was very stressed out, working long hours, and I didn't feel like I was being me. And I remember used to say to myself, right, putting the mask on before I go in, because I didn't feel like I could really be me. So I started learning Reiki back in 2008 and became a teacher in 2011. Set up my business back then, but I didn't really know. I had no idea what I was doing. And then fell pregnant and had a family. And then my best friend passed away in 2016, which sort of triggered. It was like the beginning of a snowball thing where I realized, life is short, and I wasn't really happy. I'd become like emotionally numb to life. So I'd been up in Newcastle visiting my family and went and had an Access Bars taster. Have you heard of Access Bars?
Yes.
Yeah. So I had this taster session done, came home, set my first boundary, and I was like, that felt really powerful. Where did that come from? And again, it sort of triggered this whole dark night of the soul and my own spiritual awakening again. And I knew, so I ended up getting divorced from my husband, and I knew that I didn't want to go and work for someone else because my children were so young. I wanted flexibility. So I thought, right, all I know is Reiki healing and crystals. I can sell some crystals at fairs, I can make a bit of money. That's what I'm going to do. And so that was just over 3 years ago now. But over the course of the time, I've done a lot of spiritual development, personal development, business development as well. And things have just sort of evolved and changed. So the healing that I was doing 3 years ago is very different to the work that I'm doing now. But I think that's just part of the process, and accepting and trusting upstairs, that this is what I'm meant to do.
And that's it. And seeing like an infinite potential of not being stuck in the same pattern of thinking that you only can go so far, of always expanding your awareness and your unknowingness to different parts. Myself, I had a bit of an issue where I felt stuck, where I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't feel like I could go further. And maybe it was like an ego death type of thing where I wasn't doing the work, where I was really being in the moment and just knowing that the world is filled with miracles, infinite potentials. So I kind of got held back by myself because I was having clients, and I kind of just felt stuck, but my life was so unbalanced. My family life was unbalanced. My friend life was unbalanced. My human life, where I don't do spiritual life, was unbalanced. It was all about spirituality. And at the moment, I'm going through this lesson again of having the clients, and everything seems to be so much more easier because I'm sorting my own issues out a lot more than I was before. I was jumping into it 100 miles an hour, like, right, everyone, I'm ready, come on. Then I was like, then I had a bit of a spiritual breakdown where I was like, oh shit, I've got my stuff to deal with. So talking about the dark night of the soul, Lindsay, what's your perspective on this, and why do people go through this?
So the dark night of the soul, I feel, it's that period of time where you feel lost, where you're wondering where your place is in the world, what you're meant to do. And it's like, it's a real time of reflection. So you're asking yourself all these questions because a lot of the external structures, that we've been taught are necessary, start to come crumbling down. So for me, it was my divorce, not knowing where I was going to live, not knowing, breaking up the family unit, if you like, it all felt like that. But it really sort of forced me to utilize a lot of the tools that I knew of in theory, but wasn't really using in practice. So going back to, right, the Reiki principles, just for today, I will be grateful for this, just for today, just for today. And literally, it felt like every day I was like, right, how do I feel today? What do I need to do? And really living back in the present. So practicing mindfulness, practicing gratitude, using using crystals to balance my chakras, and starting to meditate again as well, which is something that I'd read about, but I wasn't actively practicing. And it was I would say I went through it probably a good 6 or 7 months before starting to come out of it. And then I also didn't realize that you can have more than one. So I had my second one last year.
I've had my dark night of the soul for my lifetime. No, you haven't. There's
exactly. Exactly. And it's funny because like it must have been sort of towards the tail end of last year. And I'd just gone through what I can describe as another sort of like where I just wanted to cry all the time, and I didn't feel like me, but there was, again, it's trusting that, it's a process, and, we're not meant to be happy all the time. We need to experience these emotional sort of like, what would you call them? Releases. So thankfully it didn't go on as long as the first one. But I just kept utilizing again, the tools that I have just to get through it. And thankfully it was shorter, but I feel as if my ego got a bit of a bash, and then it was like, it can happen more than once, Lindsay. You're not there yet.
And that realization that we are human and we do make mistakes. A lot of us trying to be this too cookie cutter type way where it's just we fit into this mold and that's who we are, but we're complex being. We've got past life memories, we've got all of these impressions from our childhood coming into us. So going back to your childhood, what was the world like for you growing up in your eyes then?
So it's funny because I loved my childhood. I loved being a teenager. I loved school. I loved socializing, and I think I was always really interested in ghosts when I was younger. And I remember reading a book about what's it called, Voices in My Ear by Doris Stokes. And apparently I didn't know at the time, but my grandma was very much a big believer in the afterlife. And I read that, and that really opened my eyes when I was probably 11 or 12. And I was like, oh my God, there's something that happens afterwards. How awesome is that? And I always used to question heaven. I was like, how can heaven be a place? Because surely with this many billions of souls, how do they all fit in there? So I would often probably question quite a lot of stuff that was going on. And like I said to you the other day, when I was 18, and I was doing a general studies course in my A-levels, we were talking about how the world began, and it was like, was it Darwinism or was it Big Bang Theory? And I put my hand up and I was like, we're here because we're an experiment, we're aliens, etc. And everyone just like pissed themselves laughing. And I was like, right, I'm not talking about that ever again. So up until I'd probably say up until I was about 18, I was very sort of like open to stuff. But my parents weren't very, they weren't spiritual, So yeah, but you know, I enjoyed myself, and it's funny because my granddad came through to me in a open circle at the spiritualist church, and he said to me, he said, you always had like an older head on your shoulders, and he said, you know, you always showed me compassion and empathy when the adults didn't. So, and I've always I love talking to people as well, and since a kid I've been like that. I'll naturally just go up to people and just start talking to them. I never sort of adhered to that don't talk to strangers.
Have you got any ghost stories to share at all from your lifetime?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so it's funny because when I was a child, I always felt as if there was a ghost writer in my room. So like I could hear these scribbles and everything. But it wasn't until I moved in with my ex-husband that I actually saw and experienced my first ghost. So his house, it was a brand new build, and it was built on land, and it was believed that there was a portal on the stairs. So one day I was getting ready for work. I was about to do a night shift, and I'd just been lying on the settee about 4:00 in the afternoon. And I mean, would experience like sounds, banging, music, and I always felt uncomfortable. But as I just happened to look towards the dining room, there was like a double set of doors. And as I looked, there was an outline of a person just sort of stood there in front of these doors. And I went, oh! And as I did, it came towards me and then just vanished. I was just like, oh my God, what is that? Scared the absolute bejesus out of me. And thankfully, you know, I don't tend to see spirits in as if they are physical generally. That's the only sort of experience I've had. But yeah, I've been on like ghost hunts, you know, to the Castle, not the Castle Museum, around York, around Peterborough, and felt things. And so yeah, it's interesting.
I had one when I was younger. I was in a bunk bed, my brother on the top bunk. I must have woken up around about 5 a.m. and I looked out into the corridor. It was like I woke up on purpose, and I was like looking down on my pillow and looked up. For some reason, I just felt like looking into the hallway, and there was a little girl who just walked past really slowly in the corridor. And I obviously, as that age, I crapped myself and I was like, put my head up.
Yeah, I know. And like as a child, I do remember I hated going to bed. I hated the dark. And I would often be like going into my mum and dad's room going, can I come into bed with you? Because I'm scared. And I just didn't, you know, I just didn't want to sleep at night because it just freaked me out.
And it seems like there's a responsibility for the parents to really help the child with that situation. Our generation, our parents, usually they don't understand about ghosts and making the room space nice and putting incense on and just changing the energy. And let's talk about how important it is to really help the children and change the energy of the house just so we feel a bit more comfortable.
So in my house, part of what we do is smudging. So I regularly sage my house and my kids, bless them. At first they're like, oh my God, Mummy, it stinks. But now my 8-year-old's really gone into the habit. He's like, can I go and do upstairs? I'm like, yeah, you can go do it upstairs. So, you know, we regularly cleanse their rooms and sage them. And I've told my children, so my children are 8 and 5. So I've also said to them, you know, if they ever wake up feeling scared or worried, then they can always ask Archangel Michael for help. So I say to them, he's like the bad boy of the angels, you know, and he'll come in with a sword and he's like a warrior. And so, you know, it's these sort of little tools that we can teach our kids that gives them sort of like, it makes them feel empowered, doesn't it, to be able to deal with them. And what I often tell people as well and share with them is that with spirits, so some of them can be sort of like, say, like a nuisance, but I very much set boundaries with spirits as if they were a physical person. So you wouldn't allow someone to just come in and wake you up at 3:00 in the morning. So if you're not going to allow a physical person to do it, just tell them, look, thank you for coming now, but I'm not ready to speak to you. I don't want to see you. I can deal with you and I can sit down with you and speak to you in the morning. If you know, if that's what you feel like. Or if they're constantly, you know, bothering your children, then again, just saying, right, what is it that you want? Why are you coming to visit my child? And if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you know, there's plenty of people who can do it for you to tune into the energy of that spirit. And, you know, often grandparents like to come and see their grandchildren, you know, if they're in the spirit world, and just play with them or see them. But sometimes I think because children's energy is so pure and light, spirits are often attracted to their energy.
That's it, and it feels like the children trust themselves and their innocence to the world and their innocence to the whole planet. They love the moment, don't they? They're in the moment, and we as adults are kind of conditioned because of growing up, going through puberty, having to work, having to go into a system where we're not happy with. We kind of lose that innocence, and the children are like really big teachers, aren't they? To really help us.
Yeah, my daughter's definitely one of my biggest teachers.
And the mirror, anything unhealed about yourself, it will come in from there, because their energy is quite intense, isn't it? Children have an intense energy. All of the stuff, what you need to be healed, always gets thrown out of you with the children.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting when you look at the dynamics as well. So, I've tuned into both my children's energy, and my daughter has always been very clingy. She'd never want to leave my side. And I was asking about what that was. And when she was younger, when she could first talk, she kept talking about Mini and Thomas, and it was always in a very sort of like Eastern European accent. And she loves ballet as well, even though she'd never watched anything. And in a past life, she was taken from me out in Auschwitz when she was my daughter at such a young age.
And I feel like
yeah, exactly.
In the line, hey, Lindsay, I see if you like.
Yeah. So I feel like this is her like second chance, at being with me as my daughter. And then with my son, he was my mother in a past life in Africa. So it's like the dynamics change. So it's interesting when you know that as well, I think, within the family.
Yeah. So is there any clients, sometimes there's like a relationship issue, isn't there, where you've had something karmically wrong with someone and they've come as your father to kind of fix it out. Is there anything you can kind of give light onto that side of things about fixing relationships?
It's a big one. So the karmic relationships are definitely here to challenge us and to make us grow as spirits as well. And my advice would be that if there's a person that you're in a karmic relationship with, it's learning, I think, what it is that is triggering you as well. So, if, for example, I know we'll say like if your dad, I don't know, says something in a particular way, and it makes you feel angry, then it's like, right, well, how do I deal with that? And, for some people, they choose to break the bonds, with their parents or in relationships, etc.
Yeah.
But for some, it's like, well, actually, I want to work through this. So it depends, I think, where you're at as well and how you feel about, the relationship itself. Yeah. So sometimes separating from people and giving yourself distance can help. Yeah. For you to do that work on yourself and to ask yourself, right, is this relationship like an equal relationship? Am I getting as much love as I'm given? Is it, what is it about? I think just reflecting on them can really help.
Yeah, definitely. It reminded me you saying then about the past life with your family, Marley. So we had a reading from a while back, and his name was Yohanda, and he lived in India in the past life, and he used to go from town to town hugging people. And he died when he was 86, and his life review, he hugged quite a few people, and it was really, really funny because his writing, Indian people write backwards, and he can't write forwards, he has to write backwards. And really? his writing looks Indian, like the style, how he writes looks Indian, and he can't physically work out doing it the right side. He goes left and he goes backwards, and it's just how he likes to write backwards. And it's like, I was just like, well, I was just completely blown away by it.
Yeah, it just makes sense then, doesn't it?
So let's talk a bit about your book then, Lindsay. So you've created a book. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so following my Dark Night of the Soul, when I came through it, I moved out, and I remember thinking at the time, I thought, oh my days, the situation could have been so much different. Like, I could have had a nervous breakdown, I could have lost my children because my mental health might have suffered. And I just kept thinking all of these, like, oh, what if? So I sat down and I thought, I need to put the tools into a book. So at least if they help one other person, I feel like I've made a difference. So I started writing the book in April 2000. 2018. And some of it is a bit sort of like about my story and what happened. Some of it is about the tools that I used, and it gives practical tips as well on how you can use them and incorporate them. And most of the tools are free in there. So, you know, like how to use crystals, how to use gratitude, mindfulness, etc. I talk about your spiritual army, you know, which consists of your spirit guides and your angels. And then, so I self-published it in October 2018. So it's available on Amazon. Some of the writing's also channeled. So I include little bits about love and acceptance and peace. And these words were sort of given to me to put in the book. And then I'd entered it into a competition with the Soul and Spirit magazine. And it was the very last day that I just found it on Twitter. So I sent it off, and then I had this massive panic. I was like, oh my God, I put it in the wrong category. So I was trying frantically to like get it back. Anyway, I found out in March 2019, it was highly commended as the best real life spiritual self-help book in the competition, which I was so proud of, because it was the only self-published one. You know, everyone else has got publishers behind them and marketers, and I've done book drops with it as well.
Yeah, I was listening to someone who was talking about the book industry being it's very important to do your own stuff in it. And that's really, really cool that you've actually done it all yourself. So how was that process of doing it all yourself? What was it like for you?
So it felt quite cathartic, actually, initially, you know, writing the book and writing the tools down. And then I just kept asking upstairs. I knew that I needed to be called a gentle hug for the soul, because that's what I call rose quartz crystals. So when I was selling my crystals, I would always say to people, this is like having a gentle hug for the soul. So I felt like it was part of me. And I knew what I wanted the cover to look like. So a friend kindly designed the cover for me. There was a lot of the practical side, and the technical side was quite difficult in terms of doing it. And then obviously when you self-publish, there's the marketing side you've got to do yourself as well. So initially I was like, right, I want to get my book into bookshops. How do I do it? So I read through the technical side, did all of that, and I thought it's still not working. So I was in Tesco one day, and I decided that I was going to do some book drops. So I just put my book on the bookshelf in Tesco where all the other books were, took a photo of it and said, right, this is book number 1, book dropped. And then since then, I've dropped books sort of like in supermarkets, in bookshops, Waterstones, WH Smiths, hospitals, charity shops. And it's just, and then I've given them to friends to take on holiday as well. I might just drop a book in that country. So I've got 1 book in America, I've got 1 in Poland, I've got, you know, and and it's just, I think it's just when you allow yourself, you know, to have fun and you've created something, it's like, right, what can I do with it that's going to, you know, hopefully help others and impact others and hopefully make a bit of a difference in their lives. So
beautiful.
So, yeah.
And so talking about, we talked a little bit about being spiritual and being an entrepreneur. So can you help people out a little bit about understanding how can you be spiritual and be an entrepreneur and have everything balanced in that sense?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit like, you know, going back to what you said earlier about having that balance, because there's very much this sort of like old school method of, you know, oh, you have to be constantly working and doing and doing and doing, but that's not how, when you're being spiritual, it doesn't work necessarily like that. You need to allow yourself the time, you know, to allow the insights to come in, to allow that creativity to come through. So it's very much balancing those feminine and masculine energies within us, that's within all of us, to have the creative ideas, but then to take the action. So if we're sat so much, you know, in our feminine energy, and it's like, oh, I'm just thinking of all these beautiful ideas, yeah, but then not taking the action, then you're not putting it out into the world, do you know what I mean? And then you're not serving yourself either. And then when you're in your masculine energy, if you're constantly doing and doing, you're not allowing yourself to step away and going, actually, does that feel right? So whenever I make decisions or whenever I decide to do something, I always check in with upstairs and check in how it feels like in me, rather than listening to my head and my ego. So it's like, does this feel right? Does, you know, just And often what happens is if I'm sat, I mean, the way that I work is very much flitting. I have about 20 tabs open and I'm going from like Facebook to Twitter to this to that and doing a lot of social media, which I love because I love connecting with people. But sometimes I'll make like an off the cuff comment, which actually leads to something. So for example, I was saying to you before, I was on Twitter, and that's like, it's a bit of a venting platform, you know, where people like to vent about and rant. And so I felt very ranty, and I just happened to comment. Someone had said, a lady had commented about, oh, I wonder what Churchill would think of Boris Johnson. And I just commented and I said, well, I can tell you because he came through to me recently and told me what he thought. And so she emailed me and she was like, well, I'd love to hear more, Lindsay. And it turns out she's a journalist for the Daily Mail. So we had a phone conversation, and the article should be coming out later this week. And you know, just from that one comment that I listened to upstairs, and you know, they're sending me, I allow them to send me in the right direction and to where I need to go. It just opens up more. So I think trusting yourself with your business, you know, not adhering to, you know, what you're told you need to do with your business, you know, because there's so many different gurus and experts out there. And I think gaining the technical skills can really help you when you are a spiritual entrepreneur, when you're starting out, you know, and you're needing to do everything yourself. But all these different other types of experts that are out there, I think it's best to listen to yourself and trust yourself, you know, along your own path and your own journey, and keep showing up and keep putting yourself out there, because, you know, it's going to benefit you. And like you said the other day, you know, the energy that you put into something, you will get it back as well.
Beautiful. And so what's it like, so to having a number of clients and finding your own life balance? One of the big issues I've come across is having sessions during a day and having to switch off because you're connecting to so many people's energy. It can kind of forward in time to your own home and your own space where you're thinking about that person or you're thinking about that healing. Why is it important to disconnect from that and really have a barrier between those and not let everything kind of intermold into all parts of our life?
You know what, it's funny because like when I do a reading, it's not often that I think about it afterwards or I think about the client. So it's like it happens, I do my session, I do my healing, I do my reading, and then it's like that's gone. Does that make sense? So I generally do most of my work sort of like either in the evenings or on a Sunday or a Monday when I don't have my children. And then when my children are with me, it's all very grounding, you know, and I think that helps me to separate and to have that work-life balance. And also, you know, I'm very honest with my children. So like every morning, then after I have breakfast, they know that it's my time to do my yoga, because that will put me in the right place to be with them for the rest of the day. So sometimes they will sit nicely, you know, and just watch me, and other times they're like climbing on me and under me, and it's not exactly Zen, but I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing it.
It's the same with when I do meditation in the morning at 10 o'clock. I usually like to do my sessions and everything in the morning. And because for me, I have the issue when I'm doing a session that I turn on and I feel like I'm in the infinite world and my energy's raised. And for me, it's finding that balance. Afterwards, I have to either go outside or do some reading or play on a computer game or something, just to completely
ground
back to grounding into the space.
I know, I watch trash TV. I watch Real Housewives of Orange County, and that's just, I'm off.
So what sessions do you do then? We talk about channeling and light language now. So let's speak about channeling. And I've seen your things on YouTube. Just explain to everyone a little bit about channeling and what it is and your experience from it.
So, like I said, you know, when I was writing my book, that was probably my first experience of channeling, because I would sit in a meditation and just ask upstairs, right, what is it that you want me to write? And then the words, I would just start writing and trust that the words that were coming in were going out onto the paper and they weren't mine. And the way that I know when I'm channeling is when they give me words that I really struggle to pronounce. So I do my readings on in my Facebook group on a Sunday morning, and sometimes as I'm doing the readings, I know I'm channeling because I'm getting these words through. So it does come through verbally now. And then the light language as well is another form of channeling. So there's different ways that you can do it. So you can start off by doing the writing, and again, it comes down to trust. It's trusting that the words you're writing on the paper are coming from a higher being, higher source, whatever. And then I think when you start to do that, you can then allow yourself to open up to be able to speak it as well, and channeling it like that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Beautiful. And so what are some of the you've been channeling? So just Diana, was it? I saw Diana, Princess Diana. So can you just have a bit of a short one on Princess Diana and what happened during that experience?
Yeah, so she first came through to me when I was doing my yoga. And again, I said about setting boundaries. I was like, I'll come back to you. Completely forgot. That night on Facebook, someone had posted something about Princess Diana. So the next day, I just sat there and basically what I do is I just sit and I just say, right, what is it that you want to share? And I just started writing. And it's like I can see them in my mind's eye, and they either sat or stood next to me. And she wanted to share a bit about her passing and about how she was a light worker, but she didn't really realise it, and about how when she said she learned to use the media for the greater good, and she said that was a real turning point for her, which allowed her to become more confident in what she was doing, basically.
Beautiful. And so the light language, you said you've picked this up just naturally one day. There was a point where you just started. Was it a dream you had, or?
Yeah, so last October I was just falling asleep, and when you're in that state between sleep and awakeness, and I just heard this letter being pronounced from my throat, and it just said like H, and I was the only person in the room. I was like, who said that? And then I was like, it's me. That's really weird. And then it happened another couple of times where I was going into that really deep meditation and my throat was making noises. So I'd mentioned it to a lady called Susie Jones, and she also speaks light language, and we basically just had a session, and she just said, just whatever comes up, comes up. And I started chanting these words, and I thought it feels really important. So then I did it with a couple of clients of mine that I trusted, and I was like, look, can I just do a bit of this chanting and light language with you to see what comes up? And it's like, it seems to be activating something within them that's like this soul remembrance of what they're here and like to do, what their purpose is. So sometimes it sounds a bit African, sometimes it sounds a bit Latin, sometimes, I have no idea. Again, I just trust that they're giving me the words that person needs.
Beautiful. And it's about connect. It's like a soul language, isn't it? It's our alphabet's got this many letters, and we're limited by our language. And it's like, it feels like the light language can bring an infinite perspective and the universal perspective through us, and we can be turned on by our own soul codes, our own light transferring from each other. So this connecting to the Akashic record. So what is the Akashic record for people who've not heard of it? And you do the Akashic record readings as well.
Yeah, so the Akashic records, basically, if you imagine that every one of us has a massive book in a big library, and within that book, it basically goes all the way back to like your client from Orion. It goes all the way back to tell us, what soul group we belong to. It tells us, when we're first incarnated, all the different past lives we've had. It tells us who our spirit guides are, who walk with us in this lifetime, and what they bring in as well. And it also talks about our purpose as well. So what are we here to do? So I had mine done again back in 2009, and back then it made no sense. I wasn't into crystals. I was doing my retail job, never been in the media, and now it's like my spirit guides are to do with writing, to do with crystals. And in my Akashic record, it was about, being in the media and being allowed to be seen. And, I've been in various national newspapers, I've been in national magazines. So I'm definitely sort of like putting myself out there, and I feel like I'm definitely like fulfilling my purpose and doing what I'm meant to do.
Beautiful. So going now to this situation we find ourselves on planet Earth, the COVID-19 situation. So before we say goodbye, let's talk about this, and how has the experience been for you, and what positive things have come out of the experience of the COVID-19 what not so nice things.
Okay. So it's funny because when a friend asked me and she said, how are you managing? You know, has stuff changed? And I was like, not really. I was like, you know, I do spend like quite a lot of time by myself, and I'm quite happy being in my own company, and I don't necessarily rely on having to do external things and being with people to fulfill me. So I think the positive thing has been being able to spend more time with my children, and actually sort of like, just seeing them, do you know what I mean, and working with them and learning more about who they are as people has definitely been a massive positive. And also I think learning more about me and allowing myself, you know, to know that there's going to be days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm buzzing, like literally energy buzzing. And then there's going to be days where I'm like, don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit on the settee and eat nachos and watch Real Housewives, and that's it, you know. And just embracing it. And I think, you know, in the beginning there was a lot of stuff coming out around the reasons why we're in lockdown, you know, to do with like the fall of the cabal and everything else. So I did watch a couple of videos, and then I thought, you know what, I don't need to know all of this right at this moment in time. So it's quite dark stuff, but I have an awareness of it, you know. So, and I know that upstairs have given me some information as well about what's going on and the reasons, etc. So I've sort of stepped away from that a bit. And it's the same with social media. You know, sometimes I'm like, I love it, I want to be on it, and I'm there. And then other times I'm like, I'm done. Just don't want to read anything else. Do you know what I mean? So
there seems to be in the conspiracy. I'm into some conspiracy theories, but it's important not to get embraced in them, and a lot of people do get embraced in them, and they actually are angry all the time. They're posting because they're pissed off at the world, and it's actually the conspiracy theories is making people cause them disharmony and anger and guilt and shame, and all these people posting about the cabal doing this. And I just feel like that it's a way for us we have to detach from that energy, don't we, of going into it and arguing with people, and kind of, yes, the world is against us, there are some nasty people out there, but we have to come to sort of peace in ourselves and some remedy and resolve, so we can be the peacekeepers of the future, and we can all come together as clans and start creating a new world instead of. So what's it like for that industry for you? How important is it to detach from that and look after yourself?
Oh, massively. Like I said, you know, I think having the awareness of what's going on is great. And you know, when stuff first came out, I probably spent a day like going into stuff, but then I just thought, this isn't where I want to be putting my energy, you know, into people who are dark and evil and mean and nasty, etc. And I thought I would rather put my energy into helping others and into the light and into what we want the earth to look like going forward, you know, and what we want to create. And that's where I feel my energy is better spent. So, you know, like you said, I think if you start watching these videos or you have an awareness of it, then that's great. But yeah, definitely detach and keep working on yourself and what the future looks like rather than what has been. Does that make sense?
And it feels like once you get attached to that energy, you start becoming them, and you start being that chaos and that fear and that darkness. It's like what you look at looks back at you. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Lindsay. So how can people get in touch with you, my darling?
Oh, you're welcome. So they can check out my website, which is www.lindsaybanks.uk, and my Facebook group is Consciousness Arising. So if you're interested in any of the spiritual realms and, you know, you're feeling a bit alone, you can come and join us there as well.
Beautiful. And we'll have you back on in a few months, if that's all right, to talk about some other topics.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much, Dale.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure, my darling. And thank you, everyone, so much for watching the show. And I appreciate your support. And we'll see you next week. I hope. Bye-bye.